So this communication is no longer directly between the brand and the consumer. The consumer is not doing it intentionally or maliciously. They're saying they don't want the text. But what's easier? Hit one button and opt out, or reply stop, right? It's so much easier to hit that one button.
Yeah.
So as a result, because of this, two things are going to happen. Number one, opt-out rates are going to continue to head up even higher because it's easier to opt out now. And number two, almost every single brand at some point, depending on the frequency of their messages and the nature of their messages, are eventually going to get flagged as a spammer by the local carriers.
Hey, this is where I talk to the best drivers of the direct-to-consumer industry, like founders, investors, marketers, CROs, agencies, and dwell into strategies that they've been using to build some great D2C businesses. Let's go on the D2C Drive. I'm your host, Ashish Ramamurthy.
What's up, D2C drivers? My name is Ashish. I'm talking to Neal Goyal today. This guy has been like one of the people I've been following on LinkedIn. Been talking a lot on Shopify Plus brands. What should direct to consumer brands do for the next 3 years? What are the moving rights that they should follow? And Tapcart has been there as well, enabling mobile commerce, mobile SaaS, all of that for Shopify Plus brands. Neal has been there pretty much kicking ass, on LinkedIn, on wherever he is. And he's there for direct consumer brands out there. So I'm so excited to have you today. Right, so Neal leads enterprise sales at Tapcart. So Neal, let's dive into it. How did e-commerce direct to consumer happen to you? How did Tapcart happen to you? What are you guys up to?
Yeah, well, Ashish, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm so incredibly excited. I've always been a fan of your show and everything you're doing with your team, and so really excited to be having this conversation today. In terms of who I am, yes, you're exactly right. I'm a DTC coach for brands on Shopify Plus. I'm a team lead over here at Tapcart. So when you think about what we do, we typically focus on helping merchants struggle with one of their largest pain points, and that's the issue of retention. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I know you and the team over at Moda are doing a lot on the retention front. We are as well, just on a different lens of the spectrum. And so what Tapcart was built on was on the premise of saying, okay, how do we improve conversion rates and retention for brands on Shopify Plus? Those are the two largest challenges that Shopify even struggles in helping deliver that value to their individual brands, simply because mobile websites don't convert as well as they should. They don't retain as well as they should. So Shopify Plus brands have grown to rely on other apps and tools in the ecosystem to further those retention and conversion efforts. Hence why Tapcart was born, right? So Tapcart is a mobile app builder, a platform where a Shopify Plus brand can launch a mobile app in the fraction of the cost and time, zero upfront expenses, but then add an additional sales and marketing channel to a Shopify brand that's built for retention. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. My goal is to have conversations with enterprise level brands to understand what are the challenges that they're looking to solve for. And as a part of that, a lot of that conversation continues to come down to retention, right? So that's what I do in a nutshell. Yes, I'm active on LinkedIn. Yes, I provide insight wherever I can. But at the end of the day, I am a retention advocate and a fan of all conversations that point to a retention one.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Neal. I think even yesterday I was talking to Daphne Tideman, like if you've heard of her, been very active in the UK market as well, right? So she was talking about, hey, there's only one thing out there people are caring about right now, retention, right? So it's not that only enterprise brands are caring about that right now. Even smaller brands, growing brands, want to make sure that, hey, they have a great retention funnel, they have a great retention system going from day zero, so that even if they spend on a lot of money on getting in the traffic, they're able to retain and have a sustainable growth, right? So while we are talking about that, today's topic is all about how iOS 16 is going to impact and change the game for direct-to-consumer brands, what what should they look at? What should they do moving on? So we all know about iOS 14. It all came, it sailed the wind. Things changed after that, in the advertising space. People started freaking out on how to do Facebook advertising, how to segment stuff, right? How do we know where to talk to users? How do we reach back to them, right? So Apple is moving towards consumer privacy, right? And we see this whole shift going right now. So let's talk about it, right? So what's up with iOS 16? What should direct-to-consumer
Yeah.
brands know about this update?
Yeah, so that's amazing context too. So when you think about like pre iOS 14, right, before it, crushed paid social and send customer acquisitions and costs through the roof, there was a less focus on retention, just because it was pretty cost effective to advertise on Facebook and other social mechanisms, because you had that data available to be hyper targeted. Those days are gone, right? But that's why retention was kind of a backseat thought process. It was really after feeling the effects of iOS 14 where they said, hey, we're paying so much money at the top of the funnel to acquire the customer. How do we not pay that same amount over and over again? How do we retain that customer, develop the customer lifetime value in the maximized way possible? So that's where the concept of the owned channel became a powerful conversation. In other words, the three primary owned channels that direct-to-consumer brands are focused on is email, where they truly own their audience, SMS, where they own their audience, and same with push notifications, right, and what we serve. So when you think about what iOS 14 did, it kind of opened that floodgate to putting more focus on those channels, right? Now, fast forward the clock to iOS 15, right, that deployed earlier in the year. And all of a sudden, Apple made a shift from, okay, we've solved a lot of what's happening with the data privacy issues on social. Now we want to pivot that same initiative to privacy via email, right? So iOS 15 had their site sail set on email, and they call it the death of the cookie, right? And so when you think of that, like that's where brands saw email efficacy go down as a result of that. The efficacy of their campaigns, their open rates, and whatnot. So now fast forward to today, iOS 16. Apple just deployed iOS 16 just about 3 weeks ago. And the focus of iOS 16 is slightly different than what it was in 14 and 15. 14 and 15 was focused almost strictly on data privacy. iOS 16 is focused on enhancing the user's experience on the mobile device as much as possible, allowing the user to customize what they want their mobile device to be as much as possible, whether it's customizing home screen, lock screens. Those are the easy ones in terms of the aesthetics and the UI that you see in those changes. But the other aspect is the SMS portion. In other words, until now, the one area that hasn't been solved is Apple's ability to stop spammers, right? So you get these kind of junk text messages from who knows what, right? And users until now have just been swiping left and delete, swipe left and delete in order to solve it. There's not a whole lot they can do for that, right? So what Apple said is we want to give the consumer more control on who they receive messages from, right?
Right.
And that is the whole initiative behind iOS 16. That's a good thing for the consumer, the individual consumer. That's a really, really good thing. It's going to hurt and have a large impact on the spammers. However, because of these two primary changes that are taking place, which we'll dive into here in a moment, it's also going to have a negative impact on the efficacy of SMS campaigns for DTC marketers. In other words, DTC marketers and DTC brands are not the target of Apple. The spammers are the true target. However, the DTC brands are the unintended consequence as a result of this, right? So with that said, how about we dive into kind of the two major changes?
Yeah. So you brought up an interesting thing, right? So email, SMS, push notifications. I also want to add in to the fact that some of the consumers also love interacting with brands on their social media, now TikTok, right? And there's so many channels, right? And I think every consumer loves one channel interacting with the brand and just stick to it because, hey, yeah, I got a good content. These guys are sending me good coupons. These guys are giving me personalized email and whatnot, right? And everybody has got that one channel with the brand. Let's talk about it because, hey, yeah, as a brand, you got to put your shows everywhere, but you know where your consumers are going to interact with you more,
Sure.
right? So with this iOS 16, I guess the whole world of D2C brands are freaking out, right? Saying that, hey guys, we've already planned our SMS campaigns for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas. We're already looking at even 2023 to just come back and get up our sales more back again. We got our email and SMS sorted out. Now these guys are telling us, oh, dude, you guys don't have a mobile app. You guys are screwed, right? That means you got to send push notifications or stuff like that. What do you say to those kind of brands first? And second, will obviously come to those who already have a mobile app, and what should they do?
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. So the goal of a DTC brand in today's day is they're trying to meet their customer where they are, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
exactly right when you say that every brand is going to have different customers that prefer different channels, right? And a mobile app is just one of those
One
channels,
of them.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about like email, SMS, and a mobile app are in a different category of own channel as opposed to Instagram, Facebook, Google, TikTok. Those are all platforms which you're playing by their rules, you're playing by their algorithm. So the brand, as important as those channels are, they don't have really true control, right? It's really Facebook's policies, Facebook's algorithm that's at play, right?
Yeah.
It's these three channels, the own channels, where you truly are able to control who receives your message and who doesn't,
Yep.
right? You
Yep.
can truly have full control over that audience. So when you think about email, that's the easy one to think about. But the downside of email is what at best, 1 in 3 are opening that email. We're at the top of a mountain with a 33% open rate, right? Celebrating, right? And so even though email may convert well, the open rates just simply are low because people have become numb and they get lost in inboxes, right?
Yep.
Hence why SMS became a really powerful tool, right? SMS has had the benefit of saying, hey, it's a text message. A user can't avoid seeing that message. Therefore, open rates and as a result, conversion rates are going to be solid through that channel, right? At least until iOS 16, right? That was the thought process. And the downside of SMS until now was it was pay to play. So for Shopify Plus brands that have huge audiences, you're paying per text message. You're paying based on how frequently you're sending them. And so it's a very pay to play type of environment. And SMS can be very costly. Yes, it can be totally justified because it's driving a certain amount of revenue. But at the end of the day, it's very pay to play, right? So when you think of the push notification, that serves the best of both worlds. It is the open rates that rival SMS, right? Because it's coming to a user's home screen, whether it's locked or not, right? But it's unlimited and free, effectively like email, right? So the
Right.
ROI potential on a push versus any of the own channels is a night and day comparison, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, fast forward the clock to today's date, and that is, iOS 16 is alive and well. When you think of the two major changes that took place that are impacting the retention efforts when it comes to the SMS campaign is change number one is that for the very first time, when a user receives a text message or an SMS from a sender that is not a known sender, in other words, it's from an unknown number, there's going to be a report junk button right underneath that inside that text message, right?
Mm-hmm.
Previously, that feature was only available on iMessage, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
Apple's way of beta testing it on this tool, right? But iMessage is just Apple's native mechanism. Now they've deployed it to all text messages, right? So now think about what this means is yes, now you'll obviously get reduced messages by reporting this information back to the carriers. But the downside is when a brand is sending that, hey, we have this promotional sale taking place. Right now, the average opt-out rates just in general for SMS are really high, right? Over 50%, right? That's just what SMS is. People find it kind of invasive at times, right? Hence why the opt-out rate's so high. And that's okay, right? Because the ones you do keep are going to be really valuable to you, right? However, when someone didn't want a text message, what did they do? They replied stop, right? And they replied stop. That information goes back to the brand. Brand pulls them out of the list, doesn't send them text messages anymore. That communication was only one-dimensional between the consumer and the brand. That now changed, right? So now by this report junk feature, this information is not getting sent back to the brand. This information is going back to the mobile carriers, right? The Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever the local carriers are, all over the world. It's going directly back to them. And with enough of these, if you're getting an opt-out rate that's 40, 50%, eventually the mobile carriers are going to say, this particular sender is a spammer, and those campaigns are going to get blocked. So this communication is no longer directly between the brand and the consumer. The consumer is not doing it intentionally or maliciously. They're just saying they don't want the text. But what's easier? Hit one button and opt out, or reply stop, right? It's so much easier to hit that one button.
Yeah.
So as a result, because of this, two things are going to happen. Number one, opt-out rates are going to continue to head up even higher because it's easier to opt out now. And number two, almost every single brand at some point, depending on the frequency of their messages and the nature of their messages, are eventually going to get flagged as a spammer by the local carriers, right?
There's one more thing which is running in my mind, right? Every channel, let's say, becomes a spam when a lot of brands start interacting with you, right? And it takes you away from the personal space, right? How does somebody tackle this problem? Because nowadays, it's not like we're just interacting with one brand, but we're interacting with a lot of brands, right? How do you see this to be tackled right now?
In terms of staying front of mind with the customer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you think about the power of really standing out, again, yes, consumers are used to interacting with multiple brands, not just one dimensionally with one single one, right? So the question is, how does that brand really end up differentiating itself and allowing more eyeballs on them, right? Brands are obviously using platforms like Amazon to create more top of funnel type of strategies and drive traffic, but at the end of the day, what is the power of having an app is living on that user's home screen. So when you think about having an app, you're able to capitalize as an owned channel. It's the only owned channel where you have the ability to take advantage of two types of biases that are taking place in the consumer's mind. There's the conscious bias where the user is actively thinking about the brand. They're actively thinking about shopping. They're actively thinking about buying their next thing, right? And now by living on the home screen, they have the easiest possible experience with the fewest amount of friction points to be able to check out and browse what they need in a fraction of the time it traditionally would take on a website, right? That's the obvious one, right? That speaks more to changes on conversion rates that an app can trigger. But when you think about the other flip side is the subconscious bias. The user's not thinking about the brand at that moment. They're not thinking about shopping. They're not thinking about that particular segment or category. However, they are staring at their device for 6.5 hours every single day, swiping left and right across the brand's icon all day long. And that is what creates many more sessions into the brand from each individual user than could possibly be achieved on web, right? So, and what could possibly be achieved on any other platform, right? And competing for those eyeballs.
Awesome. If you don't mind, I have one more question. So right now, people are going on Shopify, creating the store, putting it online, investing in a lot on the website real estate piece of it, right? Do you think D2C brands should go mobile first, starting from day one, so that they can start riding that tide and have more people use their mobile app? What do you think about that?
That's a great question. So the question is where in the business cycle is it appropriate to launch an app? What makes sense?
Exactly.
And quite frankly, it really works at both ends of the spectrum. When you think about the enterprise level brands that are looking for as many touch points as possible, ways to interact with their customer, meet their customer where they are. So it obviously makes sense for any enterprise level brand. It doesn't have to be enterprise level, but even mid-sized brands, right, that already have some sort of following and loyal base built in, right? There's the flip side of the argument where you say, okay, I'm a newer brand, I'm earlier in my business cycle, but at the same time, how do I want to shape the behavior of my customers, right? So by having a nascent or newer building base, you actually have much more freedom in being able to shape the behavior of how you want your customers to interact with the brand. So the question is, do you want them to interact on your mobile website that's converting at 2%, or do you want them to interact with your mobile app that's converting at 6%? Right?
Yeah.
Do you want them to be responsive to promotions that are coming via text message, and you become this kind of like promotional, it's very transactional type of relationship, which ends up being a lot of SMS relationship, very transactional, discount, promotion? Or do you really want to be conversational with your audience and really say, I don't really worry about the ROI, but I just want to start a conversational communication between the customer and the brand, right? Where push notifications are used in a big way, right? So I think it can work at different ends of the spectrum. It really depends on what the ultimate goal is. One is shaping behavior. The other one is kind of leveraging the additional touch point.
Yeah, especially if you talk about those brands who wants to develop habits right out of their products, like let's say if you're say a shoe brand, right, and you want people to walk every day, you want people to run every day and motivate people, all that stuff, right? That because in the end you want people to leverage your product more and more, and that's where the importance of an app also comes into play to develop those habits. And let's say if you're also brand having a very impactful strategy in play that, hey, I want to do good to the environment, to whatever efforts are, all of that, it becomes that one place to use those push notifications, even for the fun stuff, right? Let's say, if there is a pizza day coming into play and, you can do a hell lot of fun stuff around that, right? So, yeah, I mean, like, the way my mind is rolling right now is that mobile app can be a really good way for that D2C brands and come in and develop these habits that they always wanted their consumers to do, right? Very interesting use case in my mind running. Push notifications is not something new. We've all been used to it from bigger brands, but I think seeing it from smaller brands would be something that we all would love to stay.
Yeah.
Right?
I think one of the things that smaller brands struggle with more than anything is getting their messages seen, right?
Yeah.
In other words, they're more at the helm of a Facebook algorithm, right, than the larger brands even are, where they have a little bit more control and insight into what's worked and what hasn't, right? So they're learning right now at that stage. So when you think about like the efficacy of their message getting seen, that actually speaks to the second part of the iOS 16 update that's going to impact them when it comes to SMS, right? Because why would an early stage brand or an enterprise brand want to do SMS is because those open rates are huge compared to an email, right? But iOS 16 is changing open rates too. So we talked about, the opt-out aspect of things and getting flagged as a spammer. The other major change that's happening is filtering, SMS filtering.
Okay.
In other words, now, do you remember when Gmail launched that dreaded promotions tab in Gmail, and all advertisements get filtered into that tab and separated from your primary inbox? Yeah, that was a horrible event for D2C marketers. That is happening to SMS now, right? So now, instead of if you get a message from an unknown number, it's not coming to your primary text thread. It is going to be landing in a promotions tab of SMS. There's an advertisements tab coming, a finance tab coming for your banking updates, all these different tabs, right? But when it comes, what's going to happen is that it's going to learn that this is an advertisement, and then the open rates are dropping, right? So this is no longer falling in your primary thread. Users have the ability to not only have customizability on what these filters are, but these filters are going to impact the open rates. The user may never see the message. Brands love that 95% of people see the message. Whether they interact with it or not is another story. But now that open rate is actually probably going to drop by a minimum 30%, because there's a chance that even though they're sending that message, the user will never see that message because it dropped into some filtered SMS folder, right?
Damn. Okay. Now that you've given the problem, do you have the prescription for that?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like push notifications now, before when you think of push notifications and SMS, both had similar open rates, over 90% open rates because it's coming to the home screen. Push notifications basically is the only one. that has an over
Right.
90% open rate going forward. And that's when these changes fully take effect. These filtering changes are taking effect over 16.1, 16.2, 16.3 over the coming months. But it's going to have, if you remember what happened with iOS 14, no one really panicked on the day iOS 14 was launched. They only realized this 6 months later, 3 months later, that, oh my gosh, what's happening to our customer acquisition costs? That's what's happening here. So over the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to wreak havoc on SMS marketers as a whole. On agencies that support the SMS and marketing initiative are going to see their efforts lower than where they once were. And then same thing, brands are going to be negatively impacted there. And so when you think of the push notification, why is a push notification going to remain over 90%, right? We live in Apple's world. Like a push notification is Apple's world, right? It's part of the App Store. It has to be App Store compliant. We've already, as a channel, have already been living in Apple's world from the very beginning, according to Apple's policies, right? So we do live in a protected bubble because we essentially are Apple, right? And so that's where or push notifications are directly tied to the App Store, right? So that's one of the things where push is just one of those channels. It's like, is push a total replacement for SMS? No, SMS is actually meant to work in tandem with it. But what the biggest brands are doing right now, like conversations I'm having every single day, brands are saying, hey, I have this giant subscriber list of SMS subscribers. I have 200,000 SMS subscribers. How many of them can I get opted into push notifications here? Because I already have my Tapcart app too. Now, two things are a benefit. Number one, you'll preserve the retention strategy by getting them moved over, because the retention strategy is at risk because of the lower open rates and the opt-out mechanisms. And then number two, you actually don't have to pay to send text messages to those SMS subscribers because it's free on the push side, right?
Yeah, I mean, works out on the cost front, works out on the own channel marketing front as well. Yeah, high time, guys. People listening in, high time. Get into mobile app, get into push notifications. So other thing coming out is content as such is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as we go, right? Emails were large, SMSs came down, push notifications now again has to be more really precise, right? I think as we go, marketers should really be able to write 4 or 5 words and being able to get people back in. So it's interesting, right? When people are so used to writing long form content, we just need to get now used to creating those short form, right? Even like, let's say 30-second videos or, push notifications right now. An interesting thing that would be a cool thing to do is tell people how to write cool push notifications, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and when you think about the push, though, the push front, like, the initial hook is the messaging and the copy that you include in the push, but that's only a small sliver of the content piece, right? So when you think of that, when the user touches the push, what happens? It dives them into the app, and that's where you can have long form content if you want. You can have videos, recipes, lookbooks if you're fashion, like whatever that is. Any of that content that's being created it's the app as a channel is serving as is different than SMS and email. Email is only a marketing channel. SMS is only a marketing channel, whereas an app is a sales and marketing channel. In other words, it's a marketing channel to get that push in front of users, but then it's tying directly to a sales channel that's designed to convert and immerse the audience in that content that you speak of.
Interesting. Awesome. So now let me just come into hey, I've considered this game. I know I have to go mobile. I have to go push notifications. Yes, so Tapcart would be the person that I would reach out to first. So guys, reach out to Tapcart, right? Second, now some people might be thinking, I'll build it on my own. I'll build my app on my own. Question would be, why Tapcart, right? Second question, which would be running in people's mind is, I've set up my, say, flows and automations and a lot of tools and platforms, right? I want to be able to move that because, hey, I've got my segmented customers, I've got all that sorted out. Everything is working out for me in the email SMS world. And I want to be making sure that my consumers still have a similar experience, but also enhance them further on. What are you guys thinking on these two fronts?
Great. Two great questions there. The first one is like, why wouldn't I go down the path of building an app on my own? At the end of the day, when you think of launching an app, it's a pretty complex piece of software where if you go hire a custom developer, at the end of the day, it's going to cost a lot of money, right? It requires a pretty sizable budget. But then more importantly, when you think of the longevity of the app, you're forever reliant on the developer to make changes to the app, to update the app, to keep it fresh, to keep it compliant with Apple and Google's policies. Like you're forever relying on the developer, right? So it ends up being kind of a money pit, right?
Right.
So when you think of the way Tapcart's set up, we're set up on top of Shopify. So if you go inside Shopify, your Shopify dashboard, and you have us integrated, we're living inside Shopify on the left-hand side of your sales channels inside Shopify. And so we're directly talking and already directly integrated, syncing your products, collections, inventory, descriptions, variants, photos, you name it, that are talking in real time to Shopify, payment options, your account, the user's account on Shopify is synced with the app. So if you were to go hire a custom developer to do all these things, we're talking a pretty massive budget where it's given to you effectively for free over here at Tapcart, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one part. The other part is, when you think about the integrations and the tech stack that a merchant may be working with, whether it's a CDP, right? Whether it's, an ERP system, whether it's loyalty programs, the Loyalty Lions and the Smiles of the world, whether it's reviews with, Stamped and Judge Me and other tools that they're using, we integrate with all of these, right? So our goal is to leverage what the merchant's already doing that's made them successful in their existing tech stack. In other words, the last thing we want you to do is to change your existing processes, change your loyalty partners. We integrate with all the major loyalty partners out there. We already integrate with all of Shopify's major review partners out there, right? So that's where, when it comes to the merchant's tech stack, that can all be directly integrated, again, with no coding required. It's just the way the platform's built itself, right?
Really amazing. I think similar ideologies from what we're building here as well. Okay, awesome. So I really have got no more questions to ask. There's one more thing as well, right? So now that people are looking at the spectrum, Google Ads will start playing a role in getting more traffic to your website and stuff like that. And nothing changes on that front, right? If I'm not wrong.
Of course, yeah.
So
absolutely,
people can still,
I think top of funnel is always going to be important, right? So searching for a brand, looking for a brand is always going to be important. That's never going to go away. The question is, how do you maximize that visitor when they do visit, right? How do you maximize them, have them coming back over and over and over again from those top of funnel costs that you incurred in acquiring them, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you get them in? So how do you get them into a lower funnel portion of the business, capture them, and increase customer lifetime value? On average, an app is increasing the customer lifetime value by 3x compared to what a website is doing. And so then how do you capitalize, build a better brand experience, but then more importantly, leverage what's already happening on Google and Facebook ads, what you're doing there, and maximize those efforts so they can reap rewards?
Awesome. Lovely. Thanks so much, Neal, for providing those amazing insights and updates for our listeners. Guys, feel free to follow Neal Goyal, his full name, on LinkedIn. If you just type in, you can find him. You'll also find him in the comments below, in the description below, and all of that. So thank you so much for coming in. And we'll hear more about iOS 16 moving on. And let's go Tapcart.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Ashish. This was a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.